If you know me, if you're in my close circle, know that I come from a family of astrology. My grandfather was an astrologer and my father-in-law an astrologer. So I have always had this view or perspective about astrology that was different from everyone else around me. I always knew that astrology was real and it was a real science, and I never questioned or doubted its ability as a science. But as I started growing up, I started forming a love-hate sort of relationship with it because I felt that predictive astrology, it sort of set things for you because you're questioning about your future. And I think predictive astrology is the kind of astrology that most people around the world are aware of. But today's guest is not one of them. She does not do predictive astrology. What she does is she tells your strengths and she gives you ideas of ways that you can utilize your energies in the best way. And she guides you for your business using astrology as simply. There are some people that you meet that just feel an intense connection. Marissa Fontana was one of them. I remember seeing her LinkedIn profile a couple of months back, and I was like, I don't know what it is, but I really need to talk to this woman. And I remember immediately DMing her, and we got chatting, and it was beautiful. She was also one of the people that I opened up to about some struggles that I was facing in my business as a completely new person. The relationship with her, the respect that I have for her, the way she runs her business, the way she uses astrology to run her business and her clients has always inspired me. And I am so honored that I'm bringing her onto today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Soulfully Aligned Business podcast. I'm Shruti Vidyasundar, your host and a soul purpose guide and a business mentor, an intuitive business mentor. And I'm extremely passionate about guiding you towards your soul's purpose and building an impactful, positive, and profit-driven business, translating your purpose into an impact-driven, profit-driven, and a mission. I had so much fun recording this episode with Marissa. We have spoken a lot about the difference between human design and astrology because it is often confused for complete beginners. We have also discussed about which part of your astrology chart do you need to see specifically for your business and career. We have also discussed about how you can get started on learning astrology for yourself and utilizing it in the best way for your business so that it feels right to your heart and it feels right to your soul. I just cannot wait for you to listen to this episode and give your insights into it and give your perspectives and share your feedback and go with aha moments and with this feeling of learning something, because it is a different perspective after all. Thank you so much.
So one thing it's so weird that we started talking about this, about how we look and stuff, because when I was in school, I think the Western culture was coming on too much to India, right? And putting bindi, the dot, used to be looked down upon, like putting earrings, slightly big earrings used to be looked down upon. They used to be like, it used to be called old school, sort of. So for years, I didn't put bindi at all. Okay. And I had that insecurity when I decided to start doing video stuff, when coming on to podcasts or, recording videos. And now it's sort of like, I'm really embracing the whole thing. So I'm actually going to get my nose pierced, like with a big nose ring. And I'm putting bindi and stuff like that. It just feels so good. I'm like, I don't care anymore. That don't care anymore feels amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. It looks beautiful. I'm so happy that you're embracing it. And I do think it's a different energy that you exude too
Mm.
when you love who you are and you're proud of who you are and you're no longer trying to adjust to fit other people's models or other people's expectations and whether that be how you operate in business or how you look on the outside in this vessel that
Mm.
we've decided to play in in this life, right? So I love that you're following what makes you feel good. And I know that we look at it as like not caring what other people think, but I like to look at it as caring more deeply about how we feel and how we
Oh,
think about ourselves instead of
oh,
prioritizing other people's opinions.
that's so beautiful. I've never, yes, I mean, subconsciously I knew that, but I never said it out openly, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
wow, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the introduction, for people who don't know you, Marissa, I remember meeting, just getting so attracted to your profile just by default when I came across your profile on LinkedIn. And I remember immediately DMing you. I don't know what led me to do it, but just, I don't know, it was this deep intuition of, oh, I have to talk to this woman, you know? And I think you are one of the best people I have met on LinkedIn this year. And I genuinely cannot be grateful enough. Every time I see your posts, they are like reminders from the universe to me. Every time I have a conversation with you, something shifts inside me. I don't know what. Okay. And I thought that's why it's so, so important for me to bring you on to this podcast because I know how beautiful your energy is. And I'm not saying it just because we are recording it, just FYI. Okay. And it's, I don't know, I just get filled up with so much energy when I see you. So
Oh, amazing.
for those people who don't know you and your awesomeness, okay, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm happy to. Thank you for that introduction. It makes me feel really full and really happy. And to be honest, that's what I like to call in is people who like just intuitively know. I set the intention early this year is I want to surround myself with people who feel like soul family, right? And there's really no way to attract soul family other than just being who you are really loudly and allowing that energy to draw on the people who are attracted to that energy because there's almost a familiarity there, right? Like, but anyway, to introduce myself, my name is Marissa Fontana. I am a holistic business astrologer, and my mission is to help people like you, Shruti, and coaches and healers and mystics and all of those people who are here to do really incredible things in the world, who are here to shift us into a new paradigm, who are here to raise the vibration of the planet. I help them find their own unique way of doing business in a way that feels good, in a way that's sustainable, not just financially, but energetically, emotionally. Because I've seen so many times, and I experienced it myself in my early stages of business. We have this really big mission and this really unique mission and these unique skills. And then we try to box it into business strategies that everyone else is using. And it just like dilutes our power, I think. And so I use astrology and I look at a natal chart as a unique business strategy. And we build a business around that. And then everything just kind of clicks into alignment and it clicks into flow. So I'm actually this week celebrating a year out of corporate. So this was a monumental week for me. Yeah. So I spent 10 years in corporate figuring out all of the business stuff. And then I spent probably about 9 months in my own business trying to figure it out and spending a ton of money on other people's, frameworks and things until I figured out that it was actually right in front of me. And yeah, everything has really fallen into alignment since then. And I think a big part of that for me too was my branding. And so for you to say that you were naturally drawn in by my LinkedIn profile because you found me after I had changed my branding and it
Oh,
was
wow.
branded to now align, yeah, with my midheaven energy, which I was resisting for the longest time. And so that even is just validation that it's working, right? Like the shifts that I made
Wow.
are really working. Yeah.
Wow. That's so beautiful. And I think yours was the first profile I came where you integrated business with astrology, right? Because
Mm,
I mean, I had seen people integrating human design with
yeah.
business before, but
Yeah.
and I think we have seen a lot of examples, at least people who are in the space, right? We have seen a lot of people integrating human design with business. So is integrating astrology with business similar, or how is it different from that? Because
Yeah.
I think for
Oh,
people who don't know that, right?
yeah. I love that you asked that question. This is actually a topic that's come up several times for me this week, the difference between astrology and human design. And I want to start off by they are similar. So human design uses astrology. Astrology is integrated into the system. And so I work with a lot of people who are familiar with their human design. And usually in a reading, they'll say, oh, well, that makes sense. And it works with my design like this and gate, blah, 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 and whatever. The difference to me between these two systems, and this is not just from a business perspective, but also from how people apply it in their lives and understanding, is human design is a little bit rigid in my opinion compared to astrology. So human design, it's like you're this, you're that, you have the gate or you don't, you're this type of energy, you're this type of decision maker, and you have to adjust in order to fit these
Mm.
criteria, descriptions, whatever you want to call them. Whereas astrology, I perceive astrology to be as much of an interpretive art as it is a science. And
Oh, wow.
so astrology for me, and I know that's very different. Some astrologers are incredibly scientific and predictive, and everything is very exact. That never felt good to me. I like to flow. I'm very intuitive.
Mm.
And so astrology is really just the entry point. It's the starting point to give someone an idea and honestly give someone permission to do the
Mm.
thing that they've been wanting to do anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a little less prescriptive and it's more of a simple understanding of how your mind works, how your personality is designed, the gifts that you naturally have, why you're drawn to the things that you're drawn to. And then we play from there
Mm.
and we make it work in a way that feels good. There's no like black or white, this or that. The
Mm.
way that I run my readings is I do them recorded. So I send you basically like a personalized video. I give you a whole write up on your chart and the business, suggested business strategies to go with it. And then we vibe out about it for 5 days on WhatsApp. So you can
Oh,
tell me like what feels good, what doesn't feel aligned, where do you have questions? And then we kind of brainstorm around what's coming up for you and what is misalignment versus what might be fear or limiting beliefs. And there's an openness to interpreting the energy that I just haven't found in human design. So if you're someone who wants the black and white, this or that, this is how you need to have your business strategy structured, human design is probably the right route for you. But if you're like me and need a little bit more freedom and a little bit more flow and a little bit more, I guess, like experimentation, and there's an infinite number of ways all of these energetic patterns of the planets can manifest in physical reality. And so if you like to play with that and you like to be a little bit more open in what you're creating, then my personal recommendation is astrology, because that's what has kept me rooted in astrology instead of following the trend of human design that we're seeing today.
mm. Oh my
Does
God.
that answer your question?
Yes, yes. And I have so many questions in my head now. Okay, like to give context, right? I come from a family of astrologers. My grandfather is an astrologer, was an astrologer. My father-in-law is an astrologer. And from childhood, I have always seen my grandfather guide us from from the time I remember, right?
Mm,
My grandfather had always guided us towards paths, towards decisions, towards, hey, this is what's, he was more of a predictive astrologer,
mhm,
as
mhm,
most people in India. And I had intense belief in astrology because I used to actually see him sit and do like calculations, right? Like integral
Yeah.
calculus and differential calculus. And it just used to boggle my mind. And after he passed away, a couple, I think 2 years back now, I sort of lost the belief in astrology
Mm.
because I
Mhm.
realized that what I completely believed was the person, right? And because this was exactly the problem, as you mentioned. Like with him, I could sit and have a conversation about, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I don't want to do. This is what feels right to me, right? And he would do calculations accordingly and tell me. But with others, I could not have that conversation if that sort of fiction came up, right? For example, a lot of people told me that I had to have kids 4 years back. Okay. And that
Mhm.
I was like, what? Like, but I don't feel like doing it. Oh, you should only go in corporate and you should leave corporate 10 years later. Okay. I was like, no, that doesn't feel right to me
Yeah.
at all. And so
Yeah.
it was like I had this intense connection with the science, and then that sort of broke. And now, when I am getting introduced to new forms of astrology or new, um, not forms, I think it's the same form, but like how people perceive it, right? Of
Yeah.
astrology through
Yeah.
people like you, I'm getting introduced to it again and in my terms. And that feels so beautiful and warm and heartful. So, want to thank you for that. Really. Thank you. My question in this is, you mentioned that it's you don't do predictive science, right? You
Mhm.
say it, you truly bring out the strengths of a person and
Right.
you say things as it is. And it's more of a collaborative work, it's more of a flowy work, right?
Mhm.
How do people who don't know what astrology is, how do people who think it as something woo woo, right? How
Yeah.
do they
Yeah.
get in? How do they get in? Even though their logical mind's like, hey, this is flowy, hey, this is collaborative. They are not going to say what the instructions are. But how do they perceive it and how do they get into this world?
Yeah. It's so interesting you asked that question. Most of the people who come to me, it is their introduction to astrology.
Mm.
They've heard of it, but they're not really sure how to use it. They're not really sure if they buy it. And I love that. I love being the bridge. I love being the
Oh, wow.
introduction. And I think the click for most people, and now this is tropical astrology. I work with the tropical zodiac, so it is different than what you use in Vedic. From Because I use tropical because it's material, it's earthly, it's based on the earth, and the tropical zodiac is based on the seasons of on earth. Less than it is about More than it is about the stars. The stars were just a way of measuring the patterns and cycles that we were experiencing on earth. We knew it was Aries season because the constellation was on the horizon at sunrise, right? We knew, and the season of Aries brings the energy of that zodiac sign onto earth through nature. So explaining astrology as really just being a method in which we measure what's going on earth, people had a lot of aha moments, like, oh, maybe there's something to this, right? It's something that has been
Oh,
developed
wow.
for thousands of years since we've had written language, and these patterns and these cycles have been studied and studied and studied and studied, all from the perspective of earth. The stars are just what help us keep track of what's going on, right? The placements, and it's what's gone into that study. And so when people recognize, because we believe in seasons because we experience seasons, right? We believe in energy of nature because we can see, feel, taste, touch, smell it. And so that shift in not saying like, oh, the stars are telling you who you are. It's like, no, the
Oh,
stars mapped the energy that was happening on earth the moment you were born. And we use that map to really explore how that energy has manifested in your personality, in your life, how we can use it consciously instead of you being subject to like external experiences that are bringing that
oh,
energy
wow.
to you, instead of you using it for empowerment. So I think the connection to earth has made it a lot more accessible to people, because in popular astrology, nobody talks about the origins of it. Nobody talks about
Mm.
what it actually is, right? It's just like you're a Cancer and so you're moody and like this is your
Ah,
horoscope for the week, when really it's a much deeper science, and it's been, like I said, studied for thousands of years and developed for thousands of years. And I think that gives it credibility for maybe the more like logical, material based
mm.
clients.
Oh, wow. What is usually people's aha moments when they, like when all the pieces of the puzzle fall in place? When they work with you and when all the pieces of the puzzle fall in place, what is the biggest aha moment and what is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
biggest block that they
yeah.
face?
So I think they go one and the same, actually, those two questions. The biggest aha moment, and this has been for me too, and it's because I focus on career and business astrology, is talking about the midheaven.
Mm.
Because the midheaven is the career line. It says a lot about the energetic impact you're here to make. You can interpret the work that you're here to do through different aspects of that midheaven. But the secret is the midheaven feels uncomfortable. So usually when I talk just about the midheaven, people are like, no, like, oh, like maybe I felt this way, but I don't really know. That doesn't really feel like me. Because the midheaven is what's inviting us to transcend our conditioning. It just transcend how we were raised, the survival mechanisms that we developed as a child to survive, to be accepted, to be
Oh,
loved.
wow.
And stepping into our midheaven requires us to let go of all of those beliefs and all of that conditioning. And so when I talk about it in those terms on that axis, the duality of stepping out of a comfort zone and into a higher potential, that's when it usually clicks for people. Because I think that we're wired to resist what's uncomfortable unless we understand what's causing the discomfort, right? A lot of
Oh,
times my clients are not sure how to discern between fear and misalignment. That makes sense. So
mm.
it does it feel bad because it's not in alignment, or does it feel bad because I'm really afraid because I've been conditioned to be this other thing? And astrology helps discern between those two things, whether it's your subconscious that's holding you back or if your strategy is actually not aligned with what you're here to be doing. So being able to make that distinction creates a lot of clarity and really empowers people in a big way.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So you say that your midheaven, I think my midheaven is Taurus. But so you say that your your midheaven affects your career and what you have been conditioned to from childhood and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Mm-hmm.
have, like, for people who are listening, for people who are curious about this, do you have any resource that I can guide them to have a basic reading based on the midheaven? Hey, if my midheaven is XYZ, this is the approximate thing that I can do. Of course, one-to-one sessions will help them get really specific, but
Mm-hmm.
at least an approximate guidance of what they can do. Do you have any resource like that? That would be really helpful.
That's a good question. So I while there is a lot of very credible, valuable information on the internet, if you're totally new to astrology, it's hard to determine what's like what's good, what's not. But I do think you can start there if you don't know your midheaven. So a lot of people don't know their midheaven. It's one of those things that you have to know your birth time, you have to have your chart calculated. So if you don't know your midheaven at all, start there. I recommend people use it's astrocharts.com is the simplest interpretation that I found of a free chart online. So use that. You'll find your midheaven because it's a little MC and it's going to be in the top half of your chart. And then play around with Google, right? So like Taurus midheaven, see what comes up. But this is where it's really important to feel into what resonates and what doesn't. A book that I use as a reference, and I love Jan Spiller. I reference her work a lot. She has a book I don't think it's that widely known. It's called Astrology for Success, I think.
Oh,
And she
wow.
really does a deep dive of not only the midheavens, but the midheaven rulers and the other planets in the 10th house and all of that stuff. So if you are curious to learn a little bit more, I recommend that book too. And Shruti, I can give you the link to it. But
I love that.
she is really the one who opened my eyes to the fact that your midheaven is outside of your comfort zone. It's the thing that we're meant to develop through maturity, through discipline as we live our life and grow into our potential and our purpose. Our midheaven is what we naturally embody. But when we're conscious about it, we can start leaning there and start letting go of some of that resistance because we have faith that it's actually the direction that we're meant to go. So that's the book that I would recommend the highest if you want to learn more about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. You brought a very interesting thing. So I have always wanted to ask you, okay? And this is a question coming from an astrology noob. I don't know. Okay.
Okay.
Why have you named your company 10th House Astrology?
Wonderful question. So the 10th house is the house of career. It's the house of higher calling, the house of impact. And so I did a podcast episode actually on this because my business was born through a moment of panic. I was just working under my name. I was just using Marissa Fontana as my LLC. And I had this moment of not seeing how I was going to make my existing business energetically or financially sustainable for myself. And so I thought, well, oh my gosh, maybe I'll just go back to corporate. Maybe I'll do corporate freelance. I'm good at that. I know how to make money there. I'm just going to go back to corporate. And so I thought, oh no, if I'm going to use my personal brand as my corporate brand, I have to separate these things. I have to separate the astrology from it. I need a new business name because I didn't want to give up the astrology, but I thought maybe I could just do it as a passion project. But I had this fear of people not taking me seriously if they found out that I was an astrologer trying to be in corporate again. Right. Like I should have, it was all the signs that like I coach people through, but when you're in it yourself, it's sometimes hard to see. So I was like at my computer, I was like, shit, what can I call this other business so that I can use my Marissa Fontana LLC as my corporate freelance? And it just 10th house downloaded it in my head. And I was like, that works. That makes sense. And so I just like put in the business amendment and changed the name without even really thinking about it. And this had been after like 2 years of trying to figure out what I wanted to call my business. But I think it was waiting to download until I had the recognition that astrology is actually a big part of my work. It used to be something that I only pulled in after I had a client signed with me, after we had a few sessions. And then I would say, hey, if you're interested, we can pull in your astrology chart and add this whole new layer. And every client I did that with had the most like profound, transformative, and really fast results. That's the other thing I love about astrology is it like it cuts through all of the layers of conditioning really fast. And once there's something about seeing your potential mapped out in front of you, something you can see with your eyes that I think shifts your subconscious almost instantly. I know that the subconscious work is something that's really popular right now. And I'm trained in some different modalities and I used to do that in my work too. But I found I'm a person, I like efficiency. I like to get to where we're going and then move on to the next thing. And astrology has empowered me and my clients to do that because there is a subconscious shift when you recognize what you're capable of. When you see and you have someone else speaking to you that you are here to do the thing that's been on your heart this whole time anyway, you've just been afraid to claim it. I don't know why I really took a turn here in what I'm talking about. I don't know how I got
it's
off
okay. I love it.
Yeah. So I think, 10th house astrology required me to be in a place myself to really accept astrology as being the work. And then maybe a week after that happened, I realized I didn't actually want to go back to corporate, but then I had this new business name. So I was like, well, okay, time to figure out what this business is going to be because it's already done. And I don't know if you listened to it. I'll send you I did a whole episode on it because it was like, I had a lot of like shame and embarrassment around making this big announcement that I was going back to corporate, and then a week later being like, never mind. But I shared it because it's part of my process. And I think a lot of us spin behind the scenes and we try to show up perfectly and try to pretend like everything is fine. And I know that a lot of my purpose is rooted in being really open and vulnerable about my story. And to an extent, like going first and doing the thing or saying the thing that everyone's thinking, but they're not all comfortable saying yet. And that like gives permission, I think, for other people to be even just a little easier on themselves in their progress and how they're moving through business, because it's hard. The shift is
It's
hard.
so hard. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on it.
we can unpack it. It's not as like, and the reason I do what I do too is like, I remember what it was like. It was just, a year ago for me, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like I'm in my dream. I left corporate. I'm in my business.
Yeah.
Everything is going to be wonderful now. And so when it got hard and I was questioning whether or not I made the right decision, like I almost quit. I almost just like threw up my hands and went back.
Mm.
But people who are following their heart to do the work that they feel called to do, it's because they're meant to be doing that work. It's because they came here to do that work. And so it's heartbreaking to see those people struggle with the business side of things, because like maybe they're not the greatest salesperson or the greatest marketer, because the current sales strategies that we're taught feel terrible. And so it's helping people figure out a way to embody exactly who they are and build a business strategy around that instead of trying to adapt themselves to the business strategies that we've been sold in the past.
It's, again, you brought so many thoughts and questions. It's like, I still remember, so when I quit corporate, I was like, okay, I'm going to maintain friendships with everyone I know, just in case I need to go back, right? And I was like, yeah, this is my second option. This is my second option for so long. And I still remember, so I quit in, I think, Jan of 2022. And by October, I was like, I'm not going to go back. Like, I might sleep in my friend's sofa, but I'm not going to go back. And that switch was so damn powerful, Marissa, I cannot tell you. I don't know what brought it on. I don't know. I can't explain that feeling. And every entrepreneur I know goes through that, goes through that crossroads. And there was one more crossroads that you spoke about, and it's so funny. I think yesterday or something, I wrote a post about it. It's like we struggle to integrate the emotional, spiritual parts of our business with the logical sides of the business, right? All of us have done that. Like, we have had this conversation before where, like, in my case, I don't want to take anyone's example, but in my case, like, I used to do trauma healing. I used to do, meditations and visualizations and all these amazing things in my container way before I integrated it into my offer, that I marketed, offer in double quotes, that I marketed, right? In my website or in my landing page or in my content. I think it did seep out a bit because I just couldn't help myself. But I never consciously put the woo-woo stuff in my offer, in my content, my landing pages, right? It was always behind the scenes. It was initially, I was like, can I ask them, can I ask them if they are willing to try, just as an experiment, and it just started as sprinkles because, especially as a complete logical person in my previous life, I was so scared of judgment, of being seen, of like, how will people look at me if I integrate all these things into my business, right? And I know so many people are going through that, through conversations, through one-to-one conversations, through messages. I know so many of us, so many people around us are going through that. So question number one, what would you tell them? And question number two, what was your changing point? What made you say, fuck all this shit, I'm going to integrate it? Okay. Of course, you might be scared later, okay? But You might be scared and you might overthink later. But at least, what was that moment which made you integrate everything into your business?
Yeah. So I think part of it was the story I just told, that it was really, do you mind if I curse?
Go ahead, please.
Or do you want me to edit? Okay. I
No,
call
I'm
them
not
fit
editing.
moments.
Yeah.
Okay. Like the moment where you're like, nothing is working. I don't know what I'm doing. There is such intense surrender that comes with a moment. And it's in that surrender that magic comes through. It's like we open this channel because we're no longer blocking it with our own expectations or other people's expectations, or how we think things should go. We totally release that, and then the magic happens, right? So I think part of it for me personally was that moment of thinking I needed to go a certain way, and then it wasn't working, and I panicked and I threw my hands up in the air, and then my business was born, right? It's hard to orchestrate that. It's one of those things that just happens when it's going to happen. But a big turning point for me in really embodying the astrology part of my business was actually when it came to creating content. So when I was hyper business focused, I never wanted to create. I was bored. It felt like superficial. It just like wasn't a vibe for me. And then I thought, well, what are the things that I can talk about all day? I can talk about your mind all day. I can talk about magic. I can talk about astrology. Those things, I will never, ever run out of content ideas. And so it was one of those things that's like, well, if that's naturally the things that I want to talk about, let me try. Like, let me just try it. Right. And I think that, especially if you come from a corporate background, we are paid based on our performance. We're paid to be good at what we're doing. And so the thought of being bad at something or failing when we're in business is we avoid it so dramatically, right? But that's the only way that you will evolve as an entrepreneur is by failing, by doing the thing, moving through your fear, fucking up and trying again. And so it was that realization for me too, is like, okay, well, what I was doing isn't working. Maybe it felt comfortable because it was like really basic, it was really simple, it was really minimalist, and it wasn't scary, it wasn't threatening, but it also wasn't sustainable. And so I got to the point where I was like, well, what if I just started talking about the things that I love talking about? And that shit has taken off. Like, the response that I receive from my posts now that are sometimes feel unhinged, or they're just like random things that I've read in a book, or I talk about magic, or I talk about Mercury in retrograde. And the engagement that I get from those is like so validating that
It's
these are exactly
amazing.
the messages I'm here to share. Yeah. And it's fun for me too, because again, I can talk about that stuff all day. I can go back and forth in the comments about those topics all day. If I was talking about business, I'd be bored. And so for me, it was really, really letting go of what I thought other people needed from me and just doing what felt good, and allowing that feeling good to kind of be the beacon, to be the lighthouse to people who were here for the message, who are here to be in my world, and trusting that the further you lean into what you're authentically desiring anyway, like desire is the language of your soul. If you move towards what you desire, if you move towards what makes you joy, you will never be off purpose. You just won't. It's how we're wired. It's how our soul speaks to us. So if you don't want to go through all of the analytics of the astrology and the follow your desire, like that. It's really, truly that simple. And when I started to do that, everything else really fell into place. So yeah, it takes a giant leap of faith, but I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's a rite of passage. I think moving through your fear is a really vital part of this journey to prepare you for where you're going. And there's no faster way to transform than to do the thing that scares you. So yeah, it's like move towards your fear. And I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll stop talking. I think too, we tend to think really dramatically when it comes to moving through our fear or doing things that scare us or transforming. But it can be done in little steps. It can be done one post at a time, one sentence at a time. And then you build that trust muscle, because ultimately we are wired. Our fear comes from, we think we're going to die if we do this thing, right? Usually that's rooted in
Yeah.
a fear of rejection. It's just
Yeah.
how we're biologically, neurologically wired. So if you can prove to your brain that, hey, I can talk about astrology and no one's coming after me, right? Like my life is not in danger, it's safe. So maybe we can talk about star seeds, and maybe we can talk about, spirituality a little bit more openly. And it's like those small baby steps to prove to yourself that there actually isn't a threat to your life that will help you overcome that fear. But you don't have to do it all overnight. You don't have to become who you're meant to be over in a 24-hour period. It's a lifelong journey. And I think if we allow
Oh,
ourselves to slow down and move one step at a time, and like, yeah, we do the things that we're afraid of, but we don't have to do the big thing. We don't have to climb Everest as our training ground, right? Like we can start with little baby steps and work our way towards that, because like if you don't feel good about what you're doing, what's the point, right? That's the whole point of doing this work in the first place for us, is because we felt bad in corporate. We felt bad doing work that didn't feel meaningful. So why are we going to do work that makes us feel bad still, right? It's because we're stuck in that conditioning. So I could, again, things I could talk about all day,
yeah.
but ultimately it's allow yourself to move slow and move towards what brings you joy.
It's like the universe is constantly giving me signs this week. Because just, I think day before yesterday or something, I was having a conversation with my friend, and she's extremely intuitive. Okay, she's extremely intuitive, and yeah, her energy is so different. And she was like, Shruti, you're trying to move too fast too soon. Why? What if for 1 month you just did things that brought you joy and nothing else? Forget everything, forget the outcomes, forget the clients that you would get, da 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 da. Just focus on what brings you joy. Because before that, especially because I think this fiction increased because I'm so passionate about writing and creating. Okay. I was like, I have all these amazing ideas brimming in my head, but I also need to have a content strategy. I also need to market myself. And there were so many variables going on in my head. And I was like, I don't know how people find that balance, right? I personally haven't been able to find that yet. I can be open and honest about it. So she was like, what if you stop trying to find that balance? What if you just did what your heart said? What if you just pursue joy and slowness without guilt or desperation even? Okay. So that's a 30-day challenge that she had given me. And
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
got 2 more signs. And then now you're talking about the exact same thing, completely unprompted from my side. Okay.
Maybe that's why I started going in that direction, because it wasn't from me. It was a message from whoever was sending you messages. It just channeled through. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels amazing. It feels beautiful. Oh,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
I'll say one more thing just in response to what you said. It's someone that I've worked with gave this to me, and it really helps me check myself, I'll say. She works with a lot of like inner child stuff. So, trauma and conditioning patterns and all of that. And she told me that whenever we are trying, it's a program. Because trying is different. Like we need to work hard. We need to put in the action to create the things that we want to create. I'm not saying that, but when we're trying, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to find balance. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. It's because we think we have to. We think we should. And all of that is programming. All of that is conditioning. And when we can recognize this feeling of like forced trying as a signal of like, okay, where is this truly coming from? Why do I think this is the way things have to be? Usually we can get to the source or get to the root of that pattern, and letting that go is really what frees us to follow what feels good instead of, again, being stuck in that program of trying. So whenever I find myself using that language too, it's an invitation to pause and ask myself where it's coming from. And if I could design things to be the way I wanted, what would that look like? And then I just give myself permission to do that. And it's much more fun to play that way.
Yes. Yes, it is. I've been doing it for the past 3 to 4 days, and it's been, to give context, I have been on the journey of surrender and faith and trust. And I think these terms look amazing theoretically, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're actually starting to practice it, when your physical body is not used to it, right? It is used to holding so tightly because it feels safe, right?
Yeah.
All those are safety mechanisms that were built for protecting ourselves. To let them go, to let those identities go that you have defined yourself with for years, decades even, to let each of them go and to sort of completely become a blank page and to recreate your physical self. I will not say identity, but to recreate your physical self from scratch, from a blank canvas. It's really tough, but it's worth it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I have been
Change
on the
is
path,
hard.
and it is so hard. Yeah. And I think this is my soul keeps telling me that this is the last stage of that complete removal,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
I'm just excited to become a blank canvas. It feels amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of an analogy I heard somewhere that has to do with transformation and how lobsters grow.
Mm.
So lobsters have an exoskeleton. So when their bodies outgrow their exoskeleton, they start to get really uncomfortable. And so they go somewhere to hide, essentially. They shed that exoskeleton and they grow a new one. But in the process of growing that exoskeleton, that new larger shell, they have to find somewhere safe, right? Because they're really vulnerable in those moments or in the however long it takes. And I think that there's a lot for us to learn from that process in our own transformation, right? It's like the discomfort is usually a signal that something needs to change. We're ready to grow, we're ready to expand. But that process of expansion is scary and vulnerable and hard sometimes. And having the right environment, having the right guidance, having the right support system is so vital in those vulnerable moments so that we can expand into the new version of ourselves that's being created through that blank canvas. So it sounds like you have all of those things that are in support of your success and your growth and your expansion. And I'm just so excited to see where you go from here, because April feels like a big month for a lot of us. Like we're really on the tipping point of some big exciting things. So
Eclipse season,
yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. Just a few days. What are we, the 5th? So it happens here on the 8th.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Marissa. I stopped preparing for podcasts quite a while back,
Yeah.
because this energy, and I hope people who are listening can feel it too, because this energy cannot be replicated with thought out questions. You need to let it flow. You need to vibe in. You need to just be. Thank you for being. It means a lot.
Thank you for giving me the space. Yeah, I love to record this way too. I have the same approach as you do when I have guests on. So yeah, it was fun to be on the other side of it. And you held really great space and asked you're tapped into, because you asked the questions that have been at the forefront of my mind lately also. So thank you for giving me the space to share my own thoughts and opinions and experiences the way that you did.
Thank you so much.